In the middle of the desert, the sun is not just shining. A group of exhausted boys are digging endless holes in the sand, each one 5 feet wide, 5 feet deep. Suddenly, a rattlesnake slithers onto the scene. Meanwhile, far away in the city, we meet Stanley Yelnats IV. While he's walking, out of nowhere, a pair of shoes drops from the sky and smacks him right on the head. Because apparently, gravity is out to get him too. Stanley doesn't think much of it. After all, his dad is a struggling inventor working on a cure for stinky feet. Shoes feel oddly thematic, so Stanley takes them home. But before he can say free footwear, the police surround him like he's the final boss of a crime syndicate. Turns out those weren't just any shoes. They belonged to a famous baseball player and had been stolen from a charity event. His dad's apartment is filled with experimental shoes, and Stanley has posters of the baseball player on his wall. Clearly, this isn't looking great. Fast forward to court. Stanley gets 2 options: jail or 18 months at something called Camp Green Lake. Naturally, Stanley chooses camp, because how bad can a camp with green in the name be? Spoiler alert, very bad. As the bus drives him through miles of desert, Stanley spots what looks like a merchant with a mule. For a second, he wonders if it's a hallucination, which it probably is, because who survives out here? The bus finally arrives at a small outpost filled with boys dressed like discount prisoners. This is no summer camp. This is where hope comes to die. Stanley is immediately introduced to Mr. Sir, the warden's right-hand man, who thinks Stanley's last name, Yelnats, is comedy gold. Mr. Sir is not impressed. He explains the rules of the camp. No watchtowers, no fences, no escape plans. Why? Because the camp is surrounded by hundreds of miles of dry desert with no water. Try running, and you'll be bones before sundown. Stanley is issued 2 sets of clothes and 1 shovel, his new best friend. Every day, he has to dig 1 perfectly measured hole. The longer it takes, the longer he stays under the blistering sun. Oh, and by the way, beware rattlesnakes and yellow-spotted lizards. Both will kill you faster than sunscreen runs out in July. Then Stanley meets the camp's counselor, Dr. Pendansky, who seems helpful until you realize he's basically a sarcastic life coach in a bad polo. Pendansky takes Stanley to his tent, where the other boys live. It reeks of teenage sweat and regret. He explains the first rule of survival here: don't bother the warden. The boys all have nicknames. Sounds like a welcoming environment, right? When Stanley asks one of them for water and accidentally uses a real name instead of a nickname, he gets shoved around. Lesson 2. Nicknames are sacred. Dinner that night is beans. Stanley tries to hold on to his meal, but X-Ray just takes it, declaring he deserves it more. Why? Because Stanley hasn't dug yet. The camp is basically middle school cafeteria rules with extra violence. When Stanley explains why he's there, Zero shocks everyone by asking if the stolen shoes had stars on them. When Stanley confirms, it brings back a flash of his trial, where the famous baseball star humiliated him by calling him a fake fan. Humiliation level, maximum. That night, Stanley lies awake, remembering how his family is cursed. His grandfather swears it's why nothing ever works out for them. Stanley's dad keeps failing with his inventions, and even Stanley's great-grandfather wasn't spared. He made a fortune in stocks, but was killed by none other than the outlaw Kissing Kate. She was infamous for robbing and then kissing her victims with bright lipstick. Absolutely. But she didn't kiss Stanley's ancestor. She just stole his treasure chest and left him to die in the desert. The next morning, the boys are woken before sunrise. Breakfast is 1 tortilla, and Mr. Sir hands out shovels. When Stanley grabs one, X-Ray immediately shoves him aside, demanding his usual short shovel. Apparently, even in prison camp hierarchy, theft is fair game. Out at the digging site, Mr. Sir lays down the rules. Each hole must be exactly 5 feet deep, measured by the shovel. If you find anything interesting, report it. You might get a day off. But don't get excited. He insists they're not digging for treasure, just building character. As the boys dig, Stanley struggles with his first blisters. The others laugh. He tries to ask them not to throw dirt into his hole, but they just mock him harder. It's survival of the fittest, and Stanley is not fit. As he digs, Stanley remembers the story of his ancestor Ilya Yelnats. Back in Latvia, Ilya worked on a pig farm and fell in love with Myra, the farmer's daughter. He wanted to marry her, but another man offered a fat pig as dowry. Desperate, Ilya went to Madame Zeroni, a fortune teller, who warned him to forget Myra and go to America. But Ilya didn't listen. Zeroni eventually gave him a chance. Take a small piglet up the mountain every day, let it drink from the stream, and sing it a special song. The pig would grow strong, and so would Ilya. But there was a catch. Afterward, Ilya had to carry Zeroni herself up the mountain for a drink, or else his family would be cursed forever. Ilya followed the plan, but on the day of choosing, Myra couldn't decide between the two suitors. She suggested flipping a coin to choose her husband, which insulted Ilya so much he left for America immediately. Unfortunately, he forgot to carry Zeroni up the mountain, and the curse was sealed. Cue flashback. Back in the old days, the town was bustling. A kind merchant named Sam sold magical onions that could cure anything: baldness, heartbreak, maybe even bad movies. He also claimed they kept deadly lizards away. Sam had a crush on the schoolteacher, Catherine, who traded him her homemade peach preserves for onions. Their chemistry was undeniable, but the townsmen weren't happy about it, especially Walker, the warden's grandfather, who Catherine rejected. Furious, Walker spread gossip after he saw Catherine and Sam kiss in the rain. By nightfall, the men burned the school. Catherine begged the sheriff for help, but he was drunk and disgusting, asking her for a kiss. When she refused, he mocked her and warned her Sam would be killed for the interracial relationship. Catherine ran to warn Sam, but it was too late. The townsman shot him as he rowed his boat. Heartbroken, Catherine killed the sheriff with her own gun, kissed him with bright lipstick, and left town as the infamous outlaw kissing Kate. Back to the present, X-Ray tells Stanley that if he finds anything valuable, he should hand it over to him. Later, Stanley accidentally falls onto another boy during a scuffle, nearly starting a fight. But instead of beating him up, the boys actually respect him now, nicknaming him Caveman. Soon after, Stanley gets a letter from home. His dad's foot odor experiments keep failing, and their landlord may kick them out. Life really is a curse. Meanwhile, Zero admits he can't read and asks Stanley to teach him. Stanley refuses, saying he's too exhausted. While digging, Stanley finds a small object engraved with KB, which he suspects belonged to Kate Barlow. X-Ray immediately takes credit and hands it to Pendanski. The warden herself shows up, a tall, intimidating woman with perfect red hair and a menacing smile. She orders the boys to dig furiously in X-Ray's hole. They spend days tunneling, finding only a broken dial. Eventually, the warden gives up and sends them back to normal digging. Later, Mr. Sir's bag of sunflower seeds goes missing. The boys share them around, but when Mr. Sir returns, Stanley gets caught with the spilled seeds. He takes the blame. Mr. Sir drags Stanley to the warden, expecting her to unleash fury. Instead, she shows Stanley her rattlesnake venom nail polish. After painting her nails, she slaps Mr. Sir across the face, leaving bloody scars. Stanley is dismissed, but Mr. Sir is now his sworn enemy. As thanks, Zero digs Stanley's hole. This time, Stanley agrees to teach him to read. When they next see Mr. Sir, his face is scarred and terrifying. He pointedly refuses to give Stanley water. Stanley thinks back and realizes the lipstick tube was definitely Kate Barlow's. Another flashback reveals that after Sam's death, Kate only killed the men responsible, but she also robbed others, burying treasure across the desert. One day, Walker and his wife caught up to her. Instead of killing them, Kate let a lizard bite her, taking the secret of her treasure to the grave, dooming Walker's descendants, like the warden, to dig forever. Back in the present, Stanley and Zero bond. Zero reveals his real name is Hector Zeroni. Yes, descendant of Madame Zeroni. Fate is really having a field day here. Since Zero is fast at digging, he helps Stanley, but this makes the other boys jealous. One day, Pendanski mocks Zero as dumb. Zero finally snaps and whacks him with a shovel before bolting into the desert. Mr. Sir wants to chase him, but the warden shrugs. Zero had no records, no family. They'll just pretend he never existed. Stanley can't stop worrying. He remembers how his ancestor, Stanley I, survived 16 days in the desert after being robbed by Kate, claiming he found refuge at God's thumb. Nobody knows what that means. When a new kid replaces Zero, Stanley can't take it anymore. He steals Mr. Sir's truck, but in his panic, drives it straight into a hole. Smooth. He runs off into the desert alone. The warden orders Mr. Sir to wait 2 weeks before reporting him missing. By then, there'll be nothing left. After endless walking under the blazing sun, Stanley miraculously finds Sam's old boat. Inside, Zero is alive, barely. He's been surviving by eating preserved jars of peaches, now rancid but still edible. After eating, Stanley notices a distant mountain shaped like a thumb. Realizing this must be God's thumb, he helps Zero climb. It's brutal. Zero collapses, and Stanley, refusing to let his friend die, carries him up the mountain, just like Elia should have carried Madame Zeroni. At the top, they find water and wild onions. Stanley even sings the family song, unknowingly breaking the curse forever. Meanwhile, back home, Stanley's dad finally invents a cure for foot odor, made of peaches and onions. Coincidence? Definitely not. The curse is broken. Zero then confesses. He was the one who stole the famous shoes. He thought they were just donations at the shelter. He panicked, ditched them over a bridge, and accidentally hit Stanley. Talk about bad luck turning into destiny. Stanley doesn't get mad. He's actually relieved. Soon after, Stanley's lawyer arrives, demanding his release. The warden resists, but Zero and Stanley discover Kate Barlow's chest buried near his original hole. When the warden tries to claim it, lizards swarm all over the boys, protecting them through the night. By morning, the lawyer and police arrive. The warden lies, saying the boys stole the chest, but Zero points out Stanley's name carved on it. Checkmate. Mr. Sir and Pendansky are exposed as frauds. The warden is arrested, and for the first time in decades, it rains. Later, Stanley and Zero open the chest with their families. Inside, treasure, stocks, and riches, including AT&T shares. Stanley shares everything with Zero, who finally hires investigators to find his long-lost mother. They reunite in a tearful embrace. Camp Green Lake is shut down, the boys are sent to real counseling, and Stanley's family moves into a beautiful neighborhood next door to Zero's. Stanley's dad's foot odor cure becomes a global hit, advertised by the very baseball star whose shoes started it all. Fate really does have a sense of humor. And so ends the story of Holes. And that's it for today's recap. If you enjoyed this breakdown of Holes, the movie that proved digging isn't just for dogs, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next wild story. Thanks for watching, and remember, if someone ever asks you to dig a hole in the desert for character, run the other way.